Boldwood presents Hunter, written by Ross Greenwood and read by David Thorpe. The moral right of the author has been asserted. This performance is owned by Boldwood. Chapter 1. Abel. My mother called it the sickness. Those 6 words sum up my childhood. First, until I hit 18, she insisted I call her mother. That doesn't lend itself to warmth and affection. It's a poor baseline for family life. It may be that I was born damaged, but my upbringing made things worse. My mother suffered complications after the birth. She experienced excessive bleeding and multiple stitches. They told her to think hard before having another child. In the end, I was it. It's strange to imagine their hopes and dreams resting with me. My destiny was elsewhere from their idle thoughts. They called me Abel. It's powerful, with an element of fear. My mother said she wanted a name people would remember. How right she would prove to be. Second, my behaviour changed when I started senior school. I don't think anyone notices odd conduct before that, unless you're off the scale. Mother found me blasting insects with a magnifying glass or crucifying teddies on the rockery. Poor Action Man was burnt at the stake for failing to respond to questioning. They caught me watching a neighbour's house in flames. Instead of making an emergency call, I sat on my coat on their lawn and watched the blaze take hold. The police thought they had an easily solvable case. They only exonerated me when the couple confessed they might have fallen asleep with a pan on the stove. They asked why I didn't tell anyone about the fire. I said I assumed someone else would. I knew that wasn't true, and I simply wanted to see what would happen. After the fuss died down, I realised I was different. Not from everyone, but from most. I felt responsible, and an influential part of me enjoyed that. I read the Bible and came upon the story of Abel. I discovered his brother murdered him and then Abel was forgotten. The focus was on Cain, despite his terrible deed. To my young mind, that felt wrong. I took that lesson to heart. Evil people may commit dark deeds, but it is they who are remembered, and they who have the power. The next year, a friend and I climbed a wall. He fell. The school found me observing him, as opposed to going for help, despite his howling cries of agony. That ended another of my dwindling acquaintances, and the gossip about me pushing him found its way home. I had bursts of crazy behaviour, and then spells of normality. My memories of events were hazy afterwards. I decided I just wouldn't remember. Try it sometime. It's a learned skill. Thereafter, it was the sickness, as if labelling it made it somehow more acceptable to my mother, like wrapping a dog shit in birthday paper. My mother wasn't affectionate anyway, so nothing much changed. My understanding was she thought parenthood was a duty you endured until the children left the house and were no longer your responsibility. My father cross-dressed. She called that the problem. He edited books and worked from home. My memories are of him being in his office with his male friends, laughing and drinking. I recall thinking he had a great job. I've no idea why my parents didn't split up, as they led separate lives from what I could see. Perhaps because, even though she had no empathy, she did have determination, tenacity, and her faith. Maybe that's what they'll inscribe on her gravestone. Here lies Isabella. She persevered. She couldn't have expected things to work out the way they did, bless her. The sickness and the problem. It's not surprising she wasn't fond of trips to the coast and family meals. My dad's flamboyance became more noticeable as the years passed. Around the time I was acting oddly, he began to be seen around town as Lucille. That's a tough thing to explain for any 12-year-old. As a late developer, I had little with which to defend myself. That was a bad year. An impotent rage coursed through my body, and a desire for control stamped itself on my personality. The bullies placed various letters in front of my name to insult and humiliate me. I became isolated and furious, and I wanted revenge. My parents moved us miles away. I left Abel behind and used my middle name. I still struggled to connect with others and saw life as a game, the people just pieces, ones to be idly swept from the board when their time came. For unknown reasons, I didn't see children and animals in the same light. Maybe their innocence meant different rules applied. At the beginning, I hoped my parents would notice me. I soon quit that pointless task. Later, I wanted to lash out, to hurt, but I was too weak and too lonely. Long years passed. I finished school and applied to a college on the other side of the country where nobody knew my history. There, I legally changed my surname too. I couldn't cope with the routine of academic life. The endless deadlines had me permanently on edge. Sleep eluded me. I remained in touch with my parents, but I discovered girls, drink, and drugs. After a night out, Abigail, a girl from the local area, accused me of rape. I had become interested in dominance and persuasion. I wasn't particularly bothered about having sex with the girls I met, but I was keen to see how far they'd go. It thrilled me to think someone I had met a few hours before, who I might have bought a drink, would later let me insert part of my body into hers. As with all things, I pushed too much. Many women have no boundaries, but Abigail did. She reported me to the authorities, and it looked bleak. It turned out my dad knew an influential man from a club he attended. To my amazement, the charges were dropped if I agreed never to approach her again. I can only guess money changed hands. That was one of the few gifts my dad gave me. The other was the chat we had afterwards. He called me to his office on a Sunday morning and stated that we should talk. "People are different," he said. "You may find it better to conceal yourself in plain sight. Society expects us to live a certain way, and even if that's not who you are, it's easier to give people what they want. Eventually, like me, you won't be able to control the impulses from within. What then emerges is the real you. That creature may only be here for a short time. If that's the case, revel in the joy of those moments and smile at the end." I remember nodding. Something inside recognized his words, and their coils tightened on my soul. "Failing that," he said, "stifle it with alcohol. That worked for me." He grinned. But that's what I did. I self-medicated with a vast range of substances and concealed myself amongst those who would reject me. My mother was rigid, but she showed me right from wrong. My father was the dangerous one, because he taught me how to hide. 6 months later, I drove to Abigail's home to see if I wanted retribution. Her family had little. They lived in a labourer's cottage on a farm. I waited behind a tree with a telescope until she appeared. The breeze swirled her dress, and I imagined her giggling as she pushed it down. However, I couldn't see the detail, as even with the magnified vision, she was still a blur. I wasn't stupid enough to be seen. Should I drive Abel to the deepest part of me and bury him with shame? Would he leave me? Might Abel die? Later, I pondered on what the whole experience had been like for Abigail. Then the truth hit. I didn't feel anything at all. Chapter 2. Judith, the Bird Watcher. Judith pulls her large front door closed and walks down her circular driveway. She stops when she arrives at the pavement and turns to the house. Such a grand building, although she never thought she'd end up living in only a few rooms. Raymond's Daimler is still parked outside the double garage. Not being able to drive herself, she wasn't sure what to do with it. The car, and most things, are losing the battle against the elements. She doesn't want to change anything, though, as this way, sometimes at least, it feels as if he might return. She picks her route along the bulging paving slabs. You need to be careful at this time of the morning. Her closest friend, only friend really, broke her hip tripping on one. The infection she caught in hospital killed her. She would have been 60 today. Judith's vision blurs with tears as she struggles to remember how many years ago that accident was and fails to recall why they always laughed together. Lost in her memories, she bumps into the elbow of Thomas from a few doors away. He was in a trashy magazine she read about 30-somethings partying in London, and she recognised his face. Aftershave fills the air, and she admires his expensive going-out clothes. Coming-home clothes, perhaps. Thomas is with his new partner with the ridiculous beard. She never did like that particular look. They're necking, as always. Great big slavering kisses, as though they're sharing the only remaining oxygen in the world. Is it necessary to do that in the street? All of a sudden she remembers how she was those first few weeks of love with her husband-to-be, and then she understands. Judith smiles and waits for them to stop so she can apologise. What she gets is a glance around of disdain. The boyfriend often says hi, but he is under the thrall of her neighbour, and Thomas refuses to acknowledge Judith. It's one of the few things that still evokes a reaction. It makes her mad. A week must have gone by since she had a chat with anyone. She walks away considering whether talking to the postman about discarded rubbish constitutes a conversation. The model, who lives further down her street, approaches. She doesn't know that that's the girl's job. It's just a game Judith plays. The woman has the most wondrous long hair, biblical brown locks, the kind you want to reach out and touch. It's loose in a Spanish gypsy style and makes Judith think of wild horses. Maybe her name's Claudia, and she does shampoo commercials. Judith waits for their eyes to meet so they can hail each other. The beautiful lady breezes past and, as usual, ignores her as well. Where do they all go until 5 in the morning? No one else greets her on the way. Judith enters the park. There are street lamps on the path, but they don't have the power of the ones on the road. Strange shadows stretch from bins and benches. Judith doesn't fear the dark anymore. She knows the worst things that happen to you occur while you're in bed. That's how it's been since Raymond died. Every day, sometimes hourly, she recalls those final few months. A year has passed, and she still exists in a pea soup of grief and of guilt. He was the poor man choking on his last breaths, the one whose mucus caused those horrifying sounds from the back of his throat. However, she often felt like the victim. He was leaving her alone, so it was Judith's tragedy. There's a field at the edge of the park. It's wasteland mostly. Kids have pulled 2 fence panels loose. If you're small, it's possible to squeeze through. Once, 4 boys saw her from a distance, but they fled as if they had seen a ghost. She doesn't worry about meeting anyone with evil intent. She has little to lose and may even appreciate the drama. It would be good to know her heart still beats. A pond in the middle of the field attracts the wildlife. The dawn chorus builds as first light appears on the horizon. A fallen log on the far side makes a comfortable seat to let the birds distract her from the pain, so she steps through the long grass. There's little breeze. What there is keeps her hood on her head. She feels it shift and swirl, and that's when her nostrils flare. Judith believes that the sense of smell is the final one to depart at the dreadful end. The only way she seemed to be able to settle Raymond in those awful, relentless last few days was to cuddle his skeletal frame into her body. Let him draw in her comforting fragrance. Obviously, he smelled of death by then. But there was a time when his scent close by was all she needed. Is that why she allowed the rest of her life to slip away? And is that the reason she has nothing to live for? This stench, though, is something completely different. She knew it over 40 years ago, and the vivid recollection surprises her. In the distance, she sees a thin trail of smoke. Removing her pocket binoculars, she scans the area and watches the wisps drift through a large tree. There can be nothing good over there. To her surprise, she strides towards it with purpose. She's subconsciously aware of absent birdsong. She hears an animal scurry away through the undergrowth. Other than the ever-present hum of traffic, this world is nearly silent. The wind has dropped again, but she doesn't need to smell that aroma twice to remember. She felt the whoosh as the car went up that day. It had driven into a skip, not even that fast, but the resulting explosion could have been from any number of war films. Judith and others stood close by and watched. There was nothing anyone could have done. She understood instantly it was the odour of human flesh cooking that caused her tongue to fold against the roof of her mouth as if to block her airwaves. A strange smell. Sweet and sickly charcoal was the closest description she could give when eager children probed her experience later. It registered in her brain as something never to be forgotten. In the clearing under the tree is the metal spring frame of a single bed. There is no avoiding the reek so close, but Judith doesn't care. The bed on its own isn't surprising. She's seen many a hammock or tent in that spot, even a fridge once. It's the contorted black body that grabs her attention. On approaching, she sees used disposable barbecue trays under the bed. Judith also clocks the twisted wire that secures the wrists and ankles to the 4 corners. Whatever clothing there was is burnt and unrecognisable, yet the face is untouched, except for a few bruises and marks. On close inspection, the face belongs to a woman free from pain. Not old, either, as her skin is freckled and clear. But in life, she'd have been painfully thin. What had this person done to be treated in such a way? Did she deserve it? Maybe she was a drug addict and a prostitute. Judith watched the torture of Raymond by a relentless cancer that knew no mercy. At least this one's demise would have been over relatively fast. Judith wonders why she doesn't feel for this girl's plight. Has she become a monster herself? The emotion bubbling away in her body is not sorrow or shock. It is anger. It's resentment of the model and the gay lovers who ignored her earlier. They know nothing of suffering and what Judith has been through. They're too self-obsessed and arrogant to consider others' feelings. Judith wants noticing, but the thought of getting involved with the police is unappealing. She checks her mobile and notes there is a reasonable signal. There's no escape from the 21st century here. An anonymous payphone from the street will do instead. She turns to leave. She'll need to find somewhere else to watch the birds. A trickle of sweat rolls down her back as a creaking sound comes from behind her. She's too old to run and looks back at the body. All is quiet. Even the cars are silent. She edges closer, looking down at the face. Is that a twitch she can see? Judith peers down, and suddenly the girl takes a breath. Chapter 3. Dan Flood. Dan, can you come here before you leave? It's an order, not an invitation. I'd hoped to slip out like a pimpernel with a quest for mid-strength lager. Olivia has collapsed on the sofa with the dog. Her eyes droop. The Labrador, Bailey, looks far more pleased to see me than she does. Bailey loves me more than the rest. That's because I'm the one who walks him. Perhaps in his own canine way, he hopes to even up the affection in the house. I resisted the terrible names my daughter, Grace, came up with for him. Plank, Donut and Peanuts being the memorably poor ones. Bailey was reasonable in comparison. Of course, he doesn't respond to that now. Life likes to mess with me. Our son Charlie couldn't pronounce Bailey when he was young, so he called him Baby. We all thought that was hilarious, so we called him the same. Therefore, if you hear the plaintive cries of a spurned lover on the common at dawn shouting, "Baby, come here!" that's me. Only Peanuts was worse. Gods, can you believe this? Olivia gestures to the TV. The screen fills with smoke, debris and running people. Where is that? Greece? She shoots me a disdainful glare. It's our city centre. Wow. Wow. You say wow. A gang stabbed an immigrant to death in the street yesterday. I apologise, wasn't I shocked enough for you? I didn't realise we have acceptable comments to make for that sort of thing. She gives me a small shake of her head, so I know I'm wrong, but a smile sneaks out. Sorry, I snapped. I've had a draining day. Tiredness hangs heavy on her face. You wanted to live here? Heaven knows why I thought it necessary to slip in that blade. That argument is old and weary. Have you seen Charlie? She asks. Is it a question about our son or a demand? Yeah. Chucky is in the kitchen trying to hammer something square into something round. Like the fridge into the washing machine? I wish you wouldn't call him that. You wanted to call him Charles. I wouldn't have done if I knew you'd keep calling him Chucky. I didn't know the devil possessed him back then. He's a normal 3-year-old boy. The wreckage of our house indicates otherwise, but I can see when I'm beaten. What's Grace doing? She asks. God knows I've not seen her for hours. A final dirty glance lets me understand any more banter wouldn't be appreciated. She's in her room. I eventually answer, lining up those plastic things that cost more pound for pound than gold. Are you meeting Ian? She knows I am. Why do I feel guilty? I nod with caution. Don't get too pissed. Of course not. I turn to leave and consider if I should kiss her goodbye. Bailey's stomach gurgles, which is a regular occurrence, unless it was Olivia's. Either way, I give it a miss. She barks another comment at my back. Remember what I said. Are there any worse words a woman can say to a man? I have no idea what she's on about. Since having children, my memory has become a piece of wood left in water, a heavy, useless thing that absorbs little. I forget the names of everything. Those plastic things. the names of other people's kids, and any date of importance to make sure I'm always on the back foot. Our goldfish even stare at me as if to say, "Nice to see you again, Dan." And I can't remember what they're called. Their bowl is in the hall. Cleaning it is one of my jobs. I peer into their murky world and note they're relaxing on the surface. My shoes aren't where I left them. I swear she moves them to further mess with the little confidence I have in my ability to recall even the most basic of information. My dog walking boots will do. I hope the mud and grass will fall off on the way. She marches out of the lounge as I put my hand out to close the front door, and I think she's come to kiss me goodbye after all. Instead, she climbs the stairs, adding a closing directive, "Don't forget." The door shuts, and a chill wind buffets my nervous eyes. Chapter 4. Olivia Jones. I climb the stairs, picking up a tie on the way, and step over his shoes at the top. I toss his work shirt into the wash basket. Why does he leave them next to it? Surely it can't be that much more effort to stick things inside? I trip over a pair of trainers in the bedroom and wonder again if he has early onset Alzheimer's. I must try not to nag him. When did we become a couple that didn't kiss each other when one left the house? He is trying, and I know he struggles to live in such a busy city after growing up in a little town and the life he later led. I brought him to London. Responsibility lies with me. We met in Vietnam, initially on a bus. There are many shocking 12-hour rides when you backpack through a place like that. We didn't talk the first time we saw each other. Every seat was taken, and he had to ask a man to move a box so he could sit down. After many hours of stern silence, the man growled at him in terrible English that the box contained his wife's ashes. Poor old Dan. Those never-ending journeys along damaged roads on broken seats are rarely easy, but that took some beating. We sat 10 seats away, but caught each other's eye. He gave me a small grin as though he'd known me his whole life. It still makes me smile now when I remember. I was approaching 40, yet I stuck my tongue out at him in the manner of a naughty schoolgirl. He laughed, bold and loud, like he didn't care what anyone thought. He held my stare for a few seconds, then winked, and a shimmer ran through me. I somehow knew he would be important in my life, and a sense of calm came over me that had been missing for a long, long time. I do what I've often done since he moved into my house, even though it's been many years. With stealth, I slip to the window to watch him walk down the street. He usually saunters along, smiling at people, and it always makes me relax. I hate that we argue, because I love him so much. Things will get better when the kids are older. Then we'll have more time for each other. He hasn't come into view yet, so I wave at our neighbour cleaning his fabulous car. He's a nice guy. We're lucky to have friendly people around us. I adore where we live. I bought this house over a decade ago before prices went crazy. It's so peaceful. We couldn't afford to buy here now, with me being part-time and Dan's salary. I try to make him think it's both our homes, but I know it can be difficult to move to a place where someone has lived a life before you met. The leaves are turning in the long, tree-lined street. It's as though we live in a village as opposed to the suburbs of London, and I know we'll be okay. Soon we'll marry, and then he'll belong. Chapter 5. Dan. I rest my head on the front door for a minute. Olivia and I are drifting further apart. Will we ever get it back? On cue, to sour my mood, I hear the idiot next door whistling. I can't sneak out the rear of the house as the railway line runs along there, so I have to walk out the same way every time. He will be in his drive cleaning that monstrosity of a car. If I race by with my head down, he might not notice. The Chariots of Fire theme tune powers my legs as I pace past him. "Hey, Dan!" His posh New York accent stops me in my steps as if a border guard shouted freeze. "Mike! Good to see you. Washing your car?" Again? It's getting late in the year, and the air has a nip at this hour, yet he wears a tight T-shirt. I'm a pansy in my 3 layers. His car looks like it cost more than our house. It's a flame-red bear moth with an enormous bonnet. He cleans it with long, languid strokes as though he's stroking his penis. Being British, I'm too polite to comment. Instead, I admire his rippling muscles and squint at the flash from his megawatt smile. He's a doctor or surgeon or something. He has told me before, but I couldn't concentrate due to the rubbing. "Car looks great." Our ride sits embarrassed next to his and is far from great. We have a sensible people carrier, and it's brown. Yes, that's right. Try to think of the last brown vehicle you saw. Why make a car in that colour? We, for obvious reasons, bought it cheap. I didn't think driving a shit-coloured car would bother me, yet every time I get in it, a piece of me dies. It's not even well made. The 3rd row of seats are, in effect, a crumple zone for when you are rear-ended by any of the plethora of uninsured cars around here. If we have to give other people's kids a lift along with ours, I always put theirs in the back. Is that normal? Or should I share the risk? When I'm driving them, I have visions of a squashed tin of sardines with the tomato sauce oozing out. Not only is it an eyesore, but it's also a total money pit. The thieving sharks at my local garage grin when I turn up. I'm practically paying their pensions with their exorbitant demands. Every time I've arrived to collect my car, the mechanic has been sitting on a tyre smoking. Even Mike says he'd like to teach them a lesson. He calls the manager Thieving Terry. We still use the garage, as we suspect they're all like that, and at least Thieving Terry's is situated nearby. Mike nods in agreement at my car compliment and taps the wing mirror next to him as though it's his dog. "Thanks, man. I love this car. When you coming over for a few beers? I have my own theatre. We could watch the game or a movie." Never. There's no way I'm going in there. I bet he preys on men like me. Beaten down by life, so we're too weak to fight him off. "Soon, buddy." He makes me say words like buddy, too. I disappoint myself. I deliver a rictus grin, hunch my back, and shuffle away. Chapter 6. Abel. I'm scaring myself. The venom is building. Each fresh insult from the people in this city drags me back in time to those slow months after I quit college. I returned to my parents' home a failure and wallowed in pity on my bed. Anger coursed through me. But instead of going mad, I let the darkness loose. There was only one victim. The shadowy path by the river was a place I knew well. Only a few ventured there at night, even though it was a shortcut to the housing estates from popular pubs. I cared not about the gloom and cycled without lights. I bumped into the man and knocked him to the floor. He was a target selected and drowned due to his lonely, drunken vulnerability. I awoke next morning in soaking clothes and remembered something. Not much, but an intoxicating taste of power. Mother avoided my bedroom, so I concealed the evidence. That said, part of me wanted to be caught. The headlines called it a tragic drowning. The newspapers wrote of the perils of drink. That made me laugh, because I was the danger. In my mind, I had cleansed him with the silence of eternity. I considered handing myself in and owning up, because everyone should know my name. I lusted for recognition. But living at home was like existing in a vacuum. There was no joy or pain, no highs or lows, and, more importantly, no stress. We had regular healthy meals and trips to church. The Abel who watched the fire he set after turning the neighbour's stove on, the boy who shoved his friend off a wall, the student who abused Abigail, and the man who drowned another, departed. The urges died as the memories faded. I decided I wouldn't become that which we fear when we glance over our shoulder or look under our beds. With a vow to myself of no more sickness, I would become a person who respected others, one who forgave their foolish ways. My mother gave me a decent amount of money, I suspect, to get rid of me, and I left her home to float around and enjoy life. I took jobs for little reward and even less responsibility. Days melted into months of an alcohol-filled haze with no concerns. I lived cheaply and saved hard, knowing I could always just leave before any pressure came to bear. The slightest stir from my sleeping demon had me packing my bags. Soon, Abel was completely forgotten. Many years went happily by. How foolish have I been? Of course, Abel wants to return. I ignore him, but time, like the weather, wins in the end. I trained myself to never look back and to never give in. There were to be no more regrets. Nevertheless, I fear he's taking control. Already there are huge holes in my memory. What should I do? Or is it already too late? Maybe I ought to be asking myself, what have I done? I could see a psychiatrist, but as you can imagine, it's hard to tell someone you possess a murderous part you struggle to control. Besides, I'd hate to peer too deeply inside my soul and see what lurks at the bottom. I don't want or need analysing, because I know Abel wants to be recognised. He yearns to be known and feared. Would more people die? I pray that's not his true purpose. However, if he breaks free, nothing would remain sacred. In the pursuit of notoriety, no one is safe. Chapter 7. Dan. It should only be a 10-minute stroll to the pub, but it's dusk and I'll have to walk around the park instead of through. Strange things happen in there. This city is brimming with CCTV cameras, but not in that place. It's like a different world. The junkies hang about near the entrance. Got any spare change, Gov? I might as well give them a can of cider instead and cut out the middleman. The beggar couple I often see outside the railway station is there. Sores weep on her face. I chuck them my coins and tell them to buy vegetables. He has the good grace to laugh and stands to chat. Thank you. Some people spit at us, he says. There are a lot of pricks about. You know, I hate them. I despise my existence enough without that. One day I'll have my revenge. By the way, I accept notes. Perhaps you wouldn't be in this position if you accepted jobs? I leave chuckling as he shouts after me to offer him one. Like that man, I never expected or wanted to end up in a place like this. My job destroys me. It's worse than being a battery hen. At least they don't have to go out for lunch. My salary seems reasonable, but here it's minimum wage. A fantastic salary in Cannonball, North Dakota is a poor one in Los Angeles. A good whack in Bitchfield, Lincolnshire gets you nice things, but little in London. Yes, these places do exist. The only ones lower in the food chain than me are the Australians crammed 4 to a room. At least they're all high. What I'm saying is, only rich people have a good time here. These big urban areas are places with no emotion. Make a mistake and crack a smile, then a huge hand comes from the heavens and 2 fingers pop your head. Only a few streets from our road, the houses deteriorate in quality, and passing faces admire the pavement or their latest phone. I regularly see an old man wearing an ancient 3-piece suit in his bay window, the paint peeling from the frames. Today he stares. I raise my hand in greeting, but his gaze goes right through me, and his expression remains the same. Ignorant sod. I'm looking forward to seeing Ian, though. Apart from work friends, he is the only person I can meet for a no-pressure beer. He's mad, but he keeps me anchored. I think I'd go insane myself without Ian. He reminds me of the fun person I used to be. I lengthen my stride, fantasising that I'm on my way to a country pub. I'll find large, comfortable chairs and open fires. The barman will greet me by name and have a pint of chilled, frothing lager ready without even having to be asked for it. Next to my drink, a big bowl of home-cooked crisps, unfettered by anyone's piss-covered fingers. Ian will be waiting, waving, as the jukebox quietly plays a selection of my favourite tunes. Instead, I stand outside Café Bleu and groan. It looks as inviting as a dentist from the front, and the only thing that will be blue is me when I pay their eye-watering prices. Glossy, uninterested teenagers staff this anemic shell. They serve me as though I've inconvenienced them. Every time I arrive, I stare at their blank faces, and it's clear I'm unwelcome. There used to be loads of good pubs and bars, but over time they've closed due to the double-edged axe of the smoking ban and ridiculously cheap supermarket alcohol. In the UK now, it's cheaper to buy a can of lager in Tesco than a bottle of water. Not in this bar, though. We could meet elsewhere, but Ian is happy to come here, and it means I don't have the depressing experience of waiting for and then getting on a city bus. The place, as always, is empty. Ian is nowhere to be seen. I stand at the bar and attempt to burn the back of the barmaid with my Superman X-ray vision. It doesn't work. She must have heard the door go, but tenderly slides a finger over the screen of her iPhone. On every other occasion I've been here, it's resembled an Arctic winter, but tonight it's boiling. My many layers cook me like a microwave meal. By the time she graces me with her presence, sweat stings my eyes. She's the one Ian calls the Russian. She is chillingly beautiful. Azure glare, platinum hair, makeup 3 or 4 inches thick, and a face that never smiles. Well, not for me, anyway. She looks 12 years older than my daughter, which is a sobering start to my evening. I admire her slim figure in haute couture clothes and glance at my filthy boots. I feel like the vagrants in the park I've just been pitying. Ian always describes her as being so clean, as though she's different from someone else who is fresh out of the shower. One reason I enjoy his company is that he has amusingly low moral standards. He says she's so hot she could poo on him if she wanted. She is pretty, but I'd probably draw the line at that. My pint looks like a glass of urine. She doesn't even ask for the money, only holds out her hand and gestures at the till. I take a note from my wallet, reach in my pocket for coins, and remember I gave them to those blood-sucking tramps. She plucks the note from my fingers as though she's removing a hair from a slice of cake. Ian arrives as she slams my change on the bar. "Make that 2, please," he says. There is a pause. A glance to her phone indicates she wants to say no, then a scowl as she paws. Ian looks me up and down. "Have you been hiking?" Chapter 8. The Squat. Barry Butler loves his job. Not his actual profession, of course. That's a mind-numbing role where he watches the minutes and his life tick by while advising people on the best deal to save money on their energy provider. It's a pointless existence. They've even brought in hot desking, so he has to sit at a different terminal each day. He can often smell whoever had the misfortune to have finished their miserable 8 hours at that desk before him. He's even stopped bothering to pin his photographs up at the start of a shift after his girlfriend dumped him for their boss. However, the money is good. He could afford to upgrade his wheels. He bought new Under Armour tactical boots. When he put them on for the first time, he gritted his teeth and puffed out his chest. He has them on tonight, and he feels pretty damn good. That's because for 32 hours a month, he is Special Constable Butler, a man with power. Admittedly, they don't pay him, but he loves it so much, he does it for free. He knows he walks taller in the uniform. He doesn't belong in a suit. Sometimes Barry lets his imagination run wild. He imagines himself as Judge Dredd. He growls to himself, "I am the law." A surge of adrenaline flows through Barry and he pedals faster. A member of the public rang in and explained that the front door of a house in their road has been open wide all night. He knows the area well. In fact, he is sure he's been to that property before. A twinge of fear unsettles his stomach. Turpin Street is always gloomy. The street lamps flicker here, and normal people rarely venture out after dark. It's strange, as the surrounding areas are lovely. Detective Inspector Jordan told him that a rich sheikh owned many of the houses along here, but he'd disappeared a year ago in suspicious circumstances. The buildings were mortgage-free, though, so they remain unloved and empty. They were gradually going to ruin. Mrs. Jordan is a fantastic officer. Barry looks up to her. With luck, he'll soon be a real policeman, not a plastic copper like the newspapers keep calling people such as him. Just think, he could work with professionals every day. It's a shame he keeps failing the entrance tests. The homeless took notice of the opportunity that vacant dwellings provide. Like rats, they have swarmed into the buildings. Barry hates these bastards, but he also secretly admires them. He wishes he had the balls to jack his job in and live off the grid. Maybe one day, but he needs a reference for his next police application, so there's no escape at the moment. He arrives at his destination and props his pushbike against the wall. Music blares out of the window opposite. He recognises it as the place he came to last time. A female squatter said a man raped her. They arrested the person she described, but the victim then disappeared and the case collapsed. 3 youths walk into the small garden from the house facing him and jeer. They've made a fire in a bin, and it lights them up like devils. The rapist is one of them. Barry can see his glinting gold front tooth in his grinning mouth from over the road. When Barry becomes a real policeman, he will come back here and arrest them. The sweet stench of marijuana wafts over to him. That's a reason right there for him to confront them. It's a shame they aren't given guns. In the meantime, he'll have to take his bike inside or they'll steal it. He knows he should wait for the other officer sent to join him, but hanging around outside with these idiots is unappealing. He wheels his bike through the small garden and up the steps. The door the neighbour rang in to say was open is almost closed, so he nudges it wide with his front tyre. "Police! Is anyone there?" He hears the men behind him mimic his shout. There is no reply from inside. He leans the bike against the first closed door on the right. There's a light on in a room at the bottom of the corridor. It seems like a long way to the end of the house. They designed them narrow back when this was built. Barry doesn't feel like Judge Dredd anymore. His steps through the dusty surface feel inadequate. Shards of glass tinkle on the tiled floor. The stairs lead up to total darkness. There's no way he's going up there. Barry considers the glow from the far room. There shouldn't be any lights working in here. All the services, including electricity, would have been disconnected long ago. As he gets closer, the light ahead draws him in. He doesn't think he could stop, even if he wanted to. The galley kitchen is filthy. The surfaces appear to have had full bins emptied upon them. He tries the light switch as the bulb is still present, but only a click is his reward. It's colder as he approaches the final half-open door. Again, he cries out, "Police! Make yourself known!" Barry hears nothing. There is only a build-up of pressure between his ears, an increasing roar that loosens his bowels. Slow, deep breaths echo in the silence. Barry reminds himself he is the law. If he can't handle something as mundane as this, he isn't worthy of the uniform. With a final sharp inhale, he draws his baton and nudges the door back. There is no one there. The light is a big torch on a stool pointing at the ceiling. The only other thing in the room is a freezer cabinet with an open lid. There's a cable running to the window and a slight hum indicating it's turned on. Barry leans over the cabinet and notes the chill from within. There are lumps inside, covered in a thick layer of frost from the lid not having been shut for some time. A familiar item sticks up. He reaches in and pulls out the piece of metal. It's a pair of spectacles. There are 8 frozen masses in the freezer, and Barry suspects what they are. He decides he doesn't want confirmation and backs out of the room. He walks, then runs down the corridor, slipping and sliding on the trash. A banana peel has him careering over, but he corrects himself and snatches at his bike. The door it was leaning against swings open, and there they are, 8 chairs in a circle. The bodies face each other, a blood-stained chainsaw on a table at their centre. There's no talking, though, because they're headless. Written in large red letters on the long mirror is the word pardoned. Chapter 9. Dan. Ian lowers himself into his seat at Café Bleu in the same way a crane driver puts a 50-ton block of concrete in place. I repeat the manoeuvre. "Man, we are getting old," I say. "You're full of the joys of spring." "It's autumn, that's why." "Let me guess. Job doing your pippin." Ian works for a top investment bank. Despite our years of travelling together, he still managed to pass the financial exams. He's a natural, so companies ignore his flaky CV. He has a habit of jacking in his job without giving notice for any better offer, commercial or leisure. They disregard this because he is a money-making machine. Therefore, his wage is immoral. That said, he insists on paying more than his fair share, and if I'm skint, he's happy to pay for everything. I often blame my destructive relationship with alcohol on him. My salary, of course, sucks. It's time to complain. "Yeah, it's getting worse. We're so short-staffed. I can't cope, yet they expect us team leaders to carry on hitting the ever-increasing targets. I'm so stressed by leaving time, I've started having a beer on the train on the way home. And that's fine on a Friday, but you get odd looks on a Monday. I take 2 big gulps of my now lukewarm piss and grimace. I'm worried I'm becoming a closet alkie.